What happens when a legendary icon is blindsided by questions she never agreed to answer? When decades of carefully guarded privacy clash with aggressive journalism, all unfolding live on television. This is the story of Prescilla Presley, the woman who shared her life with the king of rock and roll, reaching her breaking point in front of millions of viewers. This explosive interview, which started as a routine promotional appearance, became a media disaster that had everyone talking. Let's dive into the events that led to one of the most unforgettable moments in morning television history. The Today Show studio was buzzing with its usual morning energy when Prescilla Presley walked onto the set. She had agreed to appear on the show to discuss her upcoming memoir and the latest Elvis tribute concert series. The interview was meant to be straightforward, promotional, lighthearted, a friendly chat about her book and some fond memories of her famous late husband. Host Sarah Jenkins greeted her with a standard warm television smile. "Good morning, Prescilla. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know our viewers are excited to hear about your new book." "Good morning, Sarah. Thank you for having me," Prescilla replied, settling into the guest chair with the practiced ease of someone who had done countless interviews over the years. But before they could dive into the memoir, Sarah abruptly shifted the conversation. "Before we talk about the book, I have to ask about something that's been making headlines recently," Sarah said, her tone changing. "There have been some allegations about financial disputes within the Elvis estate. Can you comment on those?" Priscilla's smile faltered just slightly. She maintained her composure, but there was an undeniable shift. "I'm sorry, but I thought we were here to discuss my book and the tribute concerts," she replied, her voice calm yet tinged with irritation. "That's what was agreed upon with your producers." "Well, yes, but our viewers are certainly curious about these recent developments," Sarah pressed. "There are reports suggesting that there have been ongoing disagreements about how Elvis's legacy is being managed. Some sources claim that family members are at odds over various business decisions." Priscilla's patience was starting to wear thin. "Sarah, with all due respect, those are private family matters, and I don't think it's appropriate to discuss them here," she said, her voice firm but controlled. Sarah leaned forward slightly, sensing a moment to escalate. "But surely you understand that as public figures, especially when it comes to someone as beloved as Elvis, people want to know the truth about what's happening behind the scenes. The truth is that we're all working together to honor Elvis's memory in the best way possible," Prescilla responded, attempting to regain control of the conversation. "Now about my memoir, which is why I'm actually here." But Sarah wasn't finished. "Actually, speaking of truth, there's something else I wanted to address," she interjected. "We've received some information about your relationship with Elvis that contradicts what you've said in previous interviews, specifically about the circumstances surrounding your separation." Priscilla's jaw tightened, her calm demeanor faltering visibly. "Excuse me?" "Well, according to some recently surfaced documents and testimonies from people close to Elvis at the time, there are suggestions that the narrative you've presented about your marriage and its end might not be entirely accurate," Sarah continued, sensing the tension growing. "I'm just asking for clarification." Priscilla's voice was now rising, barely containing her shock and frustration. "I cannot believe what I'm hearing right now," she said. "Are you seriously questioning my own experiences and memories of my marriage?" Sarah pushed further, sensing a vulnerability. "These sources suggest that there were incidents, perhaps involving other women, that you've never publicly acknowledged. They claim that you've been protecting Elvis's image at the expense of your own truth." Priscilla's eyes flashed with anger. "What sources?" she demanded. "Who are these people making these claims?" Sarah, trying to maintain control, responded, "I'm not at liberty to reveal specific names, but these are individuals who worked closely with Elvis during the final years of your marriage. They paint a very different picture of what was happening in your relationship." The silence that followed was thick with tension. Priscilla stared at Sarah, her mind racing to process the barrage of accusations. "This is absolutely unacceptable," she said, her voice shaking with a mix of fury and disbelief. "You brought me here under false pretenses. We had an agreement about what would be discussed, and now you're ambushing me with unsubstantiated gossip from anonymous sources. These aren't just gossip, Prescilla, Sarah retorted. We've done our due diligence in verifying these claims. Our research team has spent months investigating these allegations. Allegations? Priscilla's voice was now tight with rage. You're treating my life, my marriage, like it's some criminal case to be investigated.
Elvis isn't here to defend himself, and you're trying to drag both of our reputations through the mud for what? Ratings? Sarah, sensing she had pushed too far, attempted to regain some semblance of professionalism. We're simply trying to give our viewers a complete picture.
Surely you can understand that people are interested in the real story, not just the sanitized version that's been presented for decades. Priscilla's eyes narrowed as she glared at Sarah. The interview had spiraled far beyond what she had agreed to, and the boundaries of her privacy had been irreparably crossed. I've been honest with the public for decades. I've shared my story when it was right to do so. But today? She shook her head. Today, you've crossed a line. I came here to promote a book and honor Elvis's legacy, but instead, you've chosen to use my pain, my memories, as fodder for your show. The studio fell silent. Prescilla stood up, her posture rigid with defiance. I think we're done here, she said, her voice cold. And with that, she turned and walked off the set, leaving behind a stunned Sarah Jenkins and a bewildered audience. The interview, meant to be a celebration of her life and Elvis's legacy, had transformed into a media firestorm, a disaster that no one could have predicted. As the cameras continued to roll, the only thing left in the air was the echo of a broken promise and the sharp sting of betrayal. The real story? Priscilla Presley scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. The real story is that I loved my husband deeply. We had challenges like any couple, and when our marriage ended, we remained committed to co-parenting our daughter and preserving his legacy. That's the real story, not whatever garbage these anonymous sources are peddling. The tension in the studio grew thicker with every word. Sarah Jenkins, now realizing she was treading on fragile ground, hesitated but pressed on. But don't you think fans and the public deserve to know the truth about their idol? About the man behind the legend? Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice steady but clearly pushing boundaries. The truth about what? Priscilla shot back, her voice edged with irritation. That Elvis was human? That he made mistakes? That our marriage wasn't perfect? None of that is news, Sarah. But what you're doing here is different. You're trying to sensationalize and exploit personal pain. The shift in the studio's atmosphere was palpable. What started as a professional exchange was rapidly spiraling into something more volatile, with Sarah clearly sensing the loss of control. Yet she remained resolute, intent on continuing her line of questioning. Priscilla, I understand you're upset, but these are legitimate journalistic inquiries, Sarah said, trying to assert some authority. The public has a right to know about inconsistencies in public narratives, especially when they involve cultural icons. Inconsistencies? Priscilla's voice was sharp now, the calm composure she had initially held replaced by visible frustration. What inconsistencies are you talking about specifically? Because so far all you've done is make vague accusations based on unnamed sources. Sarah quickly consulted her notes. Well, for instance, you've always maintained that your decision to leave Graceland was mutual, that you and Elvis agreed it was best for both of you. But according to our sources, there was a specific incident involving another woman that forced your hand. They claim you gave Elvis an ultimatum that he ignored. Stop right there, Priscilla interrupted, holding up her hand. I will not sit here and listen to you fabricate drama where none existed. My marriage to Elvis was complex, yes, but it was also deeply personal. The decisions we made were ours to make, and I don't owe you or anyone else a detailed breakdown of our private moments. But surely you can see how the public might feel deceived if the story they've been told for decades isn't accurate. Sarah pressed, her voice rising. Your narrative has shaped how people view Elvis, how they understand his character and his relationships. Deceived? Priscilla repeated, incredulous. I've never lied about anything. I've simply chosen not to air every piece of dirty laundry for public consumption. That's called dignity, Sarah. It's called respect for the father of my child and for our family's privacy. Sarah leaned back slightly but didn't relent. Speaking of your daughter, Lisa Marie, there are also questions about her relationship with her father during those final years. Some of these same sources suggest that Elvis's behavior during that period was more erratic than you've ever acknowledged publicly. The impact of Sarah's words was immediate and visceral. Priscilla's face drained of color before flushing with anger. "How dare you bring my daughter into this?" she demanded, her voice rising sharply. Lisa Marie was a child. She loved her father and he adored her. Whatever issues Elvis and I had as a couple had nothing to do with his relationship with his daughter. But don't you think she had a right to know who her father really was? Sarah continued, pressing forward. These sources paint a picture of a man struggling with serious personal demons. Someone who maybe wasn't as present or stable as the public was led to believe. Prescilla stood up abruptly, the sound of her chair scraping across the floor sending a shockwave through the studio. The camera operators scrambled to adjust their angles. "This interview is over," Prescilla declared firmly, her voice now commanding. "Prescilla, please sit down," Sarah said, clearly panicked as she realized her guest was about to walk off set. "We're live on national television." "I don't care if we're broadcasting to the entire planet," Prescilla shot back, her voice now echoing through the studio. "You have crossed every possible line of decency and professionalism. You brought me here to promote my work, and instead, you're trying to destroy the memory of my late husband and drag my daughter into your tabloid journalism." "We're not trying to destroy anything," Sarah protested, standing up in an attempt to salvage the situation. "We're trying to have an honest conversation about a public figure who influenced millions of people." "Honest?" Priscilla scoffed harshly. "There's nothing honest about what you're doing. You're hiding behind anonymous sources who probably don't even exist. You're making inflammatory statements disguised as questions. You're ambushing a guest who came here in good faith." Sarah looked desperately at her producers off camera, clearly receiving instructions through her earpiece. "Priscilla, our viewers are interested in these questions. Surely you can understand that your connection to Elvis makes you a public figure, and public figures have to expect scrutiny." "Scrutiny is one thing. Character assassination is another," Priscilla retorted, gathering her purse from beside her chair. "You want to scrutinize something? Scrutinize your own ethics." With that, Priscilla turned and walked off the set, leaving behind a shaken Sarah Jenkins and an audience stunned by the emotional eruption that had just unfolded. "Scrutinize how you sleep at night after pulling stunts like this," Priscilla Presley shot back, her voice full of contempt. She had already endured nearly 20 minutes of being ambushed with questions about her personal life and her late husband's legacy, and she was done. "Please, just give us a few more minutes," Sarah Jenkins pleaded, now realizing that losing her guest mid-interview would be a professional disaster. "Let's talk about your book. That's why you're here, right? Let's get back to that." Priscilla's voice dripped with sarcasm as she responded, "Now you want to talk about my book? After spending the last 10 minutes tearing apart my personal life and dragging my daughter into your smear campaign? You think you can just flip a switch and go back to friendly small talk?" The tension in the studio was thick. Crew members stood frozen, unsure of how to manage the rapidly escalating situation. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every tense moment. "Look, maybe we got off on the wrong foot," Sarah tried again, her professional training kicking in as she scrambled for damage control. "Why don't we take a quick break, regroup, and start fresh?" But Priscilla was having none of it. "There is no starting fresh from this, Sarah. You've shown your true colors. You've shown exactly what kind of journalist you are and what kind of show this is. You use deception to get guests here, then ambush them with unverified gossip." Sarah's composure was slipping. "These aren't just gossip," she argued, her voice cracking. "We have credible sources who were there, who witnessed things firsthand. Then why won't you name them?" Priscilla demanded, her voice rising. "If they're so credible, if their information is so reliable, why are they hiding behind anonymity? Why won't they go on the record with their accusations?" The studio was now electric with tension, the air thick with anticipation. Priscilla stood beside her chair, purse in hand, clearly preparing to leave. Sarah Jenkins, desperate, watched as her professional credibility seemed to crumble in front of her eyes. "Priscilla, I'm begging you to reconsider," Sarah said, her tone faltering as she tried to salvage the situation. "We can move past this. We can focus on positive things. Your memoir, your charitable work, the tribute concerts. Move past this?" Prescilla turned back to face her, her eyes blazing with fury. You think you can just pretend the last 15 minutes didn't happen? You think you can attack my integrity? Question my truthfulness, drag my daughter into your garbage journalism, and then just move on like nothing occurred? Sarah nervously glanced at the cameras, fully aware that millions of viewers were watching this disaster unfold in real time. Look, sometimes interviews take unexpected directions. That's the nature of live television. But we're professionals here, and I'm sure we can find a way to— A professional would have stuck to the agreed-upon topics, Prescilla interrupted, her voice rising to a level that made several crew members wince. A professional would have informed me beforehand if they planned to ambush me with these ridiculous allegations. A professional would have verified their sources before airing unsubstantiated claims on national television. By now, the executive producer had appeared on the studio floor, frantically gesturing to Sarah in an attempt to salvage the situation. Sarah caught his signals and made one more desperate attempt. Prescilla, what if we make this right? What if we give you the platform to set the record straight on these issues that have been raised? Set the record straight? Priscilla's laugh was bitter and sharp. The record was never crooked to begin with. That's what you don't understand. You've created problems where none existed. You've invented controversies out of thin air. And now you want me to dignify your fabrications by responding to them? Sarah was visibly sweating under the harsh studio lights, her makeup beginning to show the strain. But surely you want people to know your side of the story. My side of what story, Sarah? Prescilla shot back, her voice growing stronger. The story you just made up? The story based on anonymous sources who may or may not even exist? The story that contradicts everything I lived through personally? I was there. I lived it. I don't need to defend my own experiences to satisfy your ratings hunger. At this point, Sarah made what would become the biggest mistake of the entire interview. Perhaps driven by desperation or sheer stubbornness, she decided to double down one final time. Prescilla, I understand you're emotional about this, but emotion doesn't change facts. We have documentation that suggests— Documentation? Prescilla exploded, her composure shattering completely. What documentation? Show it to me right now. Put it on screen for everyone to see. If you have such solid evidence, such credible proof of whatever you're implying, then produce it. Sarah stammered, caught off guard by the direct challenge. Well, we have protocols about revealing sensitive materials during live broadcasts. Protocols? Priscilla's voice was now full volume, echoing through the studio. More excuses, more hiding behind vague policies and unnamed sources. You don't have any documentation, do you, Sarah? You don't have any credible sources. You have gossip, rumors, and maybe some fabricated papers that wouldn't hold up to 5 minutes of legal scrutiny. The studio had fallen completely silent, except for Priscilla's voice. Even the usually bustling technical crew had stopped working to watch the unfolding confrontation. Sarah, now realizing the magnitude of what she had unleashed, looked completely defeated. This is exactly what's wrong with journalism today, Prescilla continued, addressing the cameras as much as Sarah. You people think you can destroy lives and reputations with no consequences. You think you can ambush guests, lie about your intentions, and then hide behind the shield of journalistic inquiry when you get called out? Sarah made one last feeble attempt at control. Prescilla, please lower your voice. We're on live television. Don't you dare tell me to lower my voice, Prescilla shot back, stepping closer to Sarah's desk. You wanted drama. You wanted confrontation. You wanted to create a spectacle. Well, congratulations. You got exactly what you were looking for. But you also got something you weren't expecting. My complete and total rejection of your unethical practices. The tension had reached a breaking point. Sarah, now visibly panicked, could only watch as the executive producer frantically signaled for a commercial break. But the damage had already been done. This confrontation would be replayed and analyzed for years to come. I came here to talk about my work, my book, my efforts to preserve Elvis's legacy in a respectful and dignified manner, Prescilla continued, her voice steady but filled with righteous indignation. Instead, I find myself having to defend my marriage, my integrity, and my daughter from attacks based on anonymous gossip. This is not journalism. This is tabloid sensationalism disguised as news. Sarah finally found her voice again, but it was weak and defensive. We never meant to attack your family or your integrity. We were simply trying to explore different perspectives on— Stop lying, Prescilla cut her off sharply. That's exactly what you meant to do. This whole thing was planned. You brought me here specifically to blindside me with these questions, because you knew I would never have agreed to come on if you had been honest about your intentions. The confrontation had lasted longer than most interview segments, and the viewing audience was witnessing something unprecedented in morning television history. Social media was already buzzing with reactions and commentary as the studio remained in stunned silence. And another thing, Prescilla continued, her voice now carrying the authority of someone who had reached their limit. You sitting there acting like you're some kind of investigative journalist uncovering hidden truths. What you're really doing is exploiting a dead man who can't defend himself, and a family that has spent decades trying to honor his memory with dignity. Sarah opened her mouth, but Prescilla wasn't finished. Elvis gave the world his music, his talent, his heart. He brought joy to millions of people, and this is how you want to repay that legacy? By digging through rumors and gossip to try to tear him down for entertainment value? The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of what had become a masterclass in how not to conduct a television interview. Sarah managed to whisper, "Prescilla, we never intended," but by then it was too late. Your intentions don't matter anymore, Prescilla Presley cut in sharply, adjusting her purse strap over her shoulder, a clear signal that the conversation was over. What matters are your actions, and your actions today have been reprehensible. You've shown complete disrespect for me, for Elvis, for my daughter, and for every viewer who tuned in expecting professional journalism. By now, word had clearly spread throughout the entire television studio complex. Staff members who had no business being on set were finding excuses to walk by and witness the historic meltdown. The atmosphere was unlike anything anyone present had ever experienced during a live broadcast. I want everyone watching to understand something, Prescilla continued, now speaking directly to the camera, her voice steady and unwavering, the confidence of someone who had spent decades in the public eye radiating from her. This is not how legitimate journalism works. Real journalists don't ambush their guests. They don't make promises they have no intention of keeping. They don't hide behind anonymous sources when making serious accusations. Sarah Jenkins, realizing the gravity of the situation, made one final desperate attempt to regain control. Prescilla, please, let's just take a breath here. Maybe we can reschedule another time when we can have a more constructive conversation about— There will be no other time, Prescilla interjected, her tone final and unyielding. There will be no rescheduling. There will be no constructive conversation. You had your chance to be professional, and you chose to be predatory instead. The confrontation had now gone on far longer than anyone had anticipated. The show's format had been completely abandoned. Commercial breaks had been missed. The entire production schedule was in chaos, yet no one seemed willing or able to stop the train wreck that was unfolding live on national television. To anyone out there who is considering appearing on this show, Prescilla said, her voice now steady and measured despite the intensity of her anger. Learn from my mistake. Get everything in writing. Record your own conversations with the producers because apparently their word means absolutely nothing. Sarah looked as though she might cry, the reality of the damage done settling in. Her career in real time was potentially ending, broadcast to millions of viewers. The executive producer had given up on his frantic hand signals and was now simply staring in shock at the unprecedented disaster unfolding in front of him. You know what the saddest part of all this is? Prescilla asked, though it was clearly rhetorical. I actually had interesting things to share today. Stories about Elvis that would have entertained and enlightened your viewers. Insights about our life together that I've never discussed publicly before. But instead of creating something positive and meaningful, you chose to wallow in negativity and scandal. The studio crew had stopped pretending to work and were now openly staring. The energy was electric. This was television history in the making, and everyone present knew it. The confrontation would be replayed, analyzed, and dissected for years to come. I'm leaving now, Prescilla announced, taking a step away from the interview area. And I want to be absolutely clear about why. I'm not leaving because I'm afraid of your questions. I'm not leaving because I have something to hide. I'm leaving because I refuse to be part of this shameful display of tabloid journalism masquerading as legitimate news. Sarah, perhaps realizing this might be her last chance to salvage anything, stood up. Prescilla, wait, please let me apologize. We clearly made some mistakes here today and I want to make it right. Prescilla paused and turned back to face Sarah one final time, her gaze cold and piercing. Sarah, the only mistake you made was thinking you could get away with this. The only mistake was believing that I would sit here quietly while you attacked my family and my integrity. You didn't make mistakes. You made choices, and now you have to live with the consequences of those choices. With that, Prescilla Presley turned and walked off the set, her head held high, leaving behind a completely destroyed interview, a humiliated host, and what would undoubtedly become one of the most infamous moments in television history. The cameras continued rolling as she disappeared from view, capturing Sarah's shocked expression and the chaos that ensued as the production team scrambled to figure out what to do next. The confrontation was over, but the fallout was just beginning. In less than 30 minutes, Prescilla Presley had not only defended her family's honor, but also delivered a devastating critique of modern media practices that would resonate far beyond the confines of morning television. What did you think of this explosive confrontation? The narrator's voice asked. Was Prescilla right to storm off the set, or should she have stayed to defend herself further? Let me know in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories like this one.